What's up guys, it's Unders, and in today's video we're going to look at mixing in mono in Logic Pro. Some of the benefits, some of the cons, and how to do it.
No deal. I'm jaws on the beat, I got a flow that kills. Do my thing with a few G's, Lauren Hill.
So you want to mix in mono in Logic Pro. Well, the first thing we're going to do is jump into Logic and look at how you would set that up. And then we're going to discuss some of the benefits, the pros, cons, and reasons you might want to do this. So mixing in mono in Logic can be a great way to get your track up to a really nice professional standard, perhaps even to the point you would like to release it on the likes of Spotify and Apple Music. Well, the channel sponsor can help you out with that aspect of it. DistroKid is a digital music distributor that will get your music onto all of those major digital platforms, and they do it at a great price point that an independent artist can easily afford. You can get a discount from your first year using DistroKid in the link below. Okay, so we've got one of my tracks here, Feeling Heavy. I'm just going to use this as a demo track. The easiest way that we would set up, say, a mono mix, we'll just loop ourselves a section here to try. We're going to use our master bus. This is if your interface doesn't have any kind of mono switch, for example. So inside Logic, on our stereo output, just press X to bring up the mixer here. And our stereo output is the very last one before the master. As you can see here, for me, it's pink, called stereo out. And we're going to put the mono option last. So even though I've got a limiter on here, I placed that on for video recording purposes. We're going to put the plugin that allows us to work on last. So in Logic, when we open up our plugin list, if we go down to Logic, we've got one called Utility, and this is called Gain. So we're going to open up Gain here. We've got a couple of useful tools in Gain, but the one we really want to focus on is the mono switch just here. And what this does is it sums the left and the right channel together to make them mono. So it's going to blend the two and give us the mono output. We'll switch that on. We can play our mix and we can now hear it's going to be narrowed. Now, if we choose to do only that with the Gain plugin, then we can just simply turn it on and off to get to a mono mix. So now the Gain plugin on our stereo out can just be switched off for our stereo and back on for mono. So why might you want to do this and work this way? Well, mixing mono has some benefits as well as a couple of drawbacks. I use it very heavily for a reference tool in a mix, especially at the stage of getting started. You see, putting your track into mono, so summing our left and right channels together, can be a much easier way to get a good balance in our mix. Combine this with turning your levels down as much as you can, so you've just got a very nice quiet level to listen to, and starting with the foundations of your track, so your kick drum and bass line, bring those up to an audible level, and then bring everything else up to a level where it can just about be heard on your really low level settings. If everything's in mono, we know that it's dead center. As it pokes through in the mix, it's going to be about the right level for you in contrast to everything else. And then when we move it over to stereo, we know that that balance is overly nicely done. I did a little deeper dive in the process that I go through doing this in another video, which I can link below for you as part of the Making Drum and Bass series. When we listen to the track here, we can hear the overall balance is okay. And what I'm going to do is use the master fader to bring the level right down, and all elements should still be audible, even though the level is massively reduced. So here we've taken the track down by 20 decibels. I would sometimes work even lower than this, but we can still hear every element of the track. We can make out the kick, the snare, the vocal, the bass, the strings, and the piano all separately, even at a really low level. Which means when we bring the level back up to our sort of full gain, everything's going to be absolutely audible because we can hear it at all levels.
I'm staying.
If we balance this out in mono, when we go back over to stereo, the balance is going to be completely fine for us, even if we've panned things to the left and right, because the summed to mono has given us that balance already.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady, going up from hitting the ground. You heard.
I hope that's clear and you understand that. If not, leave a comment below and I'll dive deeper into it in another video. Another benefit of mixing mono like this, it helps us check for phase issues. Phase issues can occur when we pan one thing to one side and something else to another, especially similar sounds. In this track, the vocal has a center and a left and right.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady, going up from hitting the ground.
A good way to test whether we're having any kind of phase issues here is by summing the vocal to mono. If it's still audible in the mix and sounds correct, then we're not losing any of those key factors of the vocal.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady, going up from hitting the ground.
So here, when summed to mono, we can still hear every part of the vocal. If there was a phase issue, we would start to lose some of that vocal. Let me show you an example of what that would be like. So I've purposely created a phase imbalance in the vocal now. In stereo, it might sound fine.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady,
But when we sum it to mono,
hitting the ground.
we lose a lot of the volume and a lot of the clarity.
You heard me while I gave
Mixing in mono means we can work in stereo fields and test them to make sure everything's still working correctly.
Feeling heavy, but now
There's a huge issue in the overall mix.
up from
We've now essentially lost our vocal.
it's a drown. Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady.
Something we can do is panning while summing in mono as well. Everything's obviously going to stay in the center as we maybe pan our drums around, for example. And then we can just jump back into stereo to test the pan that we've made. The drum break is nice, it fits in mono, we can hear all the elements of it. When we open it back up with some panning, so if it works in mono, it's generally going to work when we move it into stereo. Having a mono-compatible final mix is always a benefit as well. You see, you can't regulate who or where or how anyone's going to listen to your track. Their first ever impression of it might be being played by a friend on a mobile phone that has a single speaker and sums to mono. My key example, I spent years working as an audio engineer and I worked in some huge venues with 3,000 capacity. That was a summed to mono system. It was summed to mono to give that real impact of music, in that everything was perfectly synced, all the speakers could be calibrated and balanced perfectly so that in the dance floor you got that real pound in the chest. There's a couple of drawbacks to watch out for when you're mixing in mono. For example, if you're putting reverb into a mix, it can be very difficult to gauge how much of that to put in. For example here, this lead has a reverb sent to it. If we put it in context of the whole track, when summed into mono, the reverb almost disappears. We can still hear the lead, but we could mistakenly push this far too far. Now, it's given us the impression of the lead being more balanced in the mix. However, when we move it over to stereo, it will be evident that there's simply too much reverb there now. This is something we definitely need to watch out for, that we're not doing things like reverb and stereo effects, like delays that are quite quick. They give the impression of lifting up the volume overall, and then when going to stereo, we'll just get a big smeary spread. So those are some of the benefits and a couple of the drawbacks of mixing in mono in Logic Pro. Something that I would suggest that you use, not necessarily sparingly, but make sure you do back and forth. It will seem at first sometimes that you move back into stereo and it just, the mix opens up and is much wider and louder. This is the same sort of difference as if you were to suddenly switch to a track that has been compressed and is much louder. It gives that impression of greatness and fullness instantly because it's suddenly new stimuli, it's wider, it seems brighter. If you go back and forth continually and just use it as a nice tool to balance out, it'll be a great way for you to work. I hope the video has been helpful for you guys, and I do look forward to seeing you on the next one.